was standing in the doorway of my shop that October evening, one hand on the lock, the other trembling against the frame, when I heard the sound that would unravel everything I thought I knew about my life. It was the kind of sound you can't unhear. Sharp, broken, desperate. A woman's sob cutting through the cool autumn air like a knife through silk. I should have locked that door. I should have walked away. But I didn't. And that single moment of hesitation became the thread that pulled my entire world apart. My name is Eleanor Hartley. I'm 63 years old, and for 42 of those years, I've been a dressmaker in the small town of Millbrook, Pennsylvania. My shop sits on the corner of Elm and 3rd, a narrow brick building with a faded awning and a bell that chimes when you push through the door. For decades, that bell announced brides and their mothers, prom girls giggling with excitement, women who needed hems adjusted or buttons replaced. But lately, the bell had grown quiet. Too quiet. My son, David, had been telling me for months that it was time to close up. Time to retire. Time to let go. If you've ever been told that the thing you've built with your own 2 hands is no longer worth keeping, you know exactly how I felt in that moment. It's not just about money or practicality. It's about identity. It's about purpose. When you've spent your entire adult life doing one thing, being one thing, the thought of stopping feels like erasure. Like becoming invisible. So even though the bills were piling up and my arthritis made threading needles a daily battle, I kept resisting David's gentle but persistent pressure to close the shop. I kept showing up. I kept hoping the bell would chime again. And before I go any further, let me just say this. If you're watching this from somewhere in the world right now, drop a comment and tell me where you're from. Because what I'm about to tell you, what happened to me, it could happen to anyone, anywhere. And if you've ever felt like you were holding on to something that everyone else said you should let go of, you're going to understand this story in your bones. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, because I need you to hear every word of what comes next. And check the description box below for more stories like this one. Stories about people like us, trying to survive the curveballs life throws when we least expect them. That evening, David had been in the shop with me. He's 38 now, works in finance in Philadelphia, but he drives out to Millbrook every few weeks to check on me. He'd been sitting at my old work table, surrounded by bolts of fabric and half-finished alterations, going through my account books with that concerned crease between his eyebrows that makes him look so much like his father. My late husband, Thomas, died 7 years ago, and since then, David has tried to fill that protective role. Sometimes it's comforting. Sometimes it's suffocating. "Mom," he'd said that afternoon, his voice careful, measured, "the numbers don't lie. You're losing money every month. The lease is up in January. This could be a clean exit. You could finally rest. Travel. Spend time with the grandkids." I'd nodded along, not really agreeing, just letting him talk. I'd heard it all before. The logical arguments. The financial projections. The well-meaning concern. But logic doesn't account for the weight of memory soaked into every corner of a place. It doesn't calculate the value of the spot where Thomas proposed to me, right there by the fitting room mirror. It doesn't measure the worth of the hundreds of women who trusted me with their most important moments, their weddings and proms and anniversaries. David couldn't see what I saw when I looked around that shop. He saw faded wallpaper and outdated equipment. I saw a life. By 6 o'clock, David had packed up his laptop and given me that sad, patient smile that said we'd talk about it again soon. He kissed my forehead and left, and I was alone with the decision I'd been avoiding for months. The decision that felt less like a choice and more like a surrender. I walked through the shop slowly, running my fingers over the old Singer sewing machine that had been my mother's, over the pincushion shaped like a tomato that Thomas had given me as a joke on our first anniversary. I picked up a spool of ivory thread and watched it catch the fading light from the window. And I thought, maybe David is right. Maybe it's time. I was locking the front door when I heard her. That broken, desperate sound. I turned, and there she was, a woman in her early 30s, blonde hair wild around her face, mascara streaked down her cheeks, clutching something wrapped in plastic against her chest like it was a child. She was running toward me, stumbling in heels that clicked frantically against the sidewalk, and when our eyes met, I saw something in her face that stopped my breath. Pure, unfiltered panic. "Please," she gasped as she reached me, nearly colliding with the door. "Please, are you still open? I know it's late, I know, But I need help. I need you. I should have said no. I should have told her I was closed, pointed her toward the alterations shop 2 towns over, wished her luck and gone home. But there was something about the way she said those last 3 words. I need you. Not I need help. Not I need a seamstress. I need you. As if I, specifically, was the only person in the world who could save her. And maybe I was tired. Maybe I was emotional from David's lecture and my own spiraling thoughts. Or maybe, after all those quiet weeks of that silent bell, I just wanted to feel needed again. I unlocked the door. She rushed past me into the shop, bringing with her the scent of rain and perfume and something else, something sharp and frantic. She was breathing hard, her hands shaking as she carefully laid the plastic-wrapped bundle on my work table. When she peeled back the covering, I saw it, a wedding dress. Not just any dress, but a stunning vintage gown, probably from the 1950s, with delicate lace sleeves, a fitted bodice with pearl buttons, and layers of tulle in the skirt. It was breathtaking. It was also damaged. A long tear ran down the left side of the bodice, and several of the pearl buttons were missing. The hem was stained and frayed. My wedding is tomorrow morning, she said, her voice cracking. Tomorrow. At 10 a.m. This dress belonged to my grandmother. She died 3 years ago, and wearing it tomorrow it was supposed to be, she couldn't finish. She pressed her hands to her face and sobbed, her whole body shaking. I stepped closer, professional instinct taking over. I examined the tear, tested the fabric's integrity, checked the buttons. It was bad, but not impossible. With the right thread, the right technique, and enough time, I could fix it. But enough time was the problem. It was already 6:30. To repair this properly would take me all night. Maybe longer. My hands ached just thinking about it. My eyes watered from the strain of close work I'd been avoiding lately. I was exhausted. I was heartbroken about my shop. I was in no condition to take on an all-night emergency repair. Please, she whispered again, looking at me with those red, swollen eyes. I'll pay you anything. Anything. I can't get married without this dress. I can't. And there it was. That feeling I'd been chasing for months. The feeling of being essential. Of being the person someone turned to when everything else failed. I thought about David's words, about closing the shop, about fading into retirement and irrelevance. And I thought, not yet. Not tonight. I'll do it, I heard myself say. Come back at 7 tomorrow morning. I'll have it ready. The relief that flooded her face was so profound, so overwhelming, that for a moment I felt like a hero. She grabbed my hands, squeezed them hard, thanked me over and over through fresh tears. She told me her name was Sarah. Sarah Calloway. She gave me her phone number, made me promise to call if there were any problems, and then she was gone, leaving me alone with the dress and the impossible task I'd just agreed to. I locked the door behind her and stood there for a long moment, staring at the gown spread across my work table. The shop felt different suddenly. Charged. Alive. I turned on every light, brewed a pot of strong coffee, and got to work. As I threaded my needle and began the painstaking process of repairing that beautiful, damaged dress, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Purpose. Direction. Like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, doing exactly what I was meant to do. I didn't know then that I was sewing together the pieces of my own destruction. I didn't know that by morning, everything I thought I understood about my life, my past, and my family would shatter like glass. All I knew was that I had a dress to mend and a bride counting on me. And in that moment, it felt like enough. The hours bled together in that quiet shop. 10 o'clock became midnight, became 3 a.m., and I was still hunched over Sarah Calloway's grandmother's dress, my fingers cramping, my eyes burning under the harsh work lights. But I didn't stop. There's a rhythm to this kind of work, a meditation in the repetitive motion of needle through fabric, thread pulled taut, tiny stitches forming an invisible seam. It's the kind of work that empties your mind and fills it at the same time. While my hands moved automatically, my thoughts wandered through memories I usually kept locked away. I thought about my own wedding dress. Simple, elegant, nothing like this elaborate vintage gown, but mine. I'd made it myself, staying up late in my mother's sewing room, trying to get every seam perfect. Thomas had cried when he saw me walking down the aisle. Actually cried. I'd teased him about it for years afterward, but the truth was, I'd loved him for those tears. They meant he saw me. Really saw me. That dress was long gone now, donated to charity after Thomas died because I couldn't bear to look at it anymore. But sometimes, late at night, I could still remember exactly how the fabric felt against my skin, how the weight of it moved when I walked. By 4 a.m., I'd repaired the tear in the bodice. The stitches were so fine, so carefully matched to the original work, that you'd never know there had been damage. I felt a quiet pride in that. This was what I was good at. Making broken things whole again, making it look like they'd never been broken at all. I moved on to the buttons, sewing on replacements I'd found in my collection of vintage notions. Not exact matches, but close enough that only an expert would notice the difference. The hem took longer. I had to remove the stained section entirely, carefully reattach the layers of tulle, and reinforce the stitching. My arthritic fingers screamed in protest, but I kept going. Around 5:30, as dawn started to brighten the windows, I finished. I held the dress up, examining every inch under the light, and allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. It was perfect. Better than perfect. I'd restored it so completely that it looked exactly as it must have looked on Sarah's grandmother 60 years ago. I carefully hung it on a padded hanger, covered it with fresh plastic, and set it in the front of the shop where she'd see it immediately when she arrived. Then I made myself another cup of coffee, washed my face in the small bathroom, and tried to shake the exhaustion from my bones. David called at 6:45, his voice concerned. "Mom, I drove past the shop this morning and saw your lights on. Did you sleep here? What's going on?" I explained about Sarah, about the emergency repair, about staying up all night to finish the dress. I tried to make it sound noble, heroic even, but I could hear the worry in his silence. "Mom," he said finally, "you can't keep doing this. You can't keep sacrificing yourself for strangers who probably won't even remember your name next week. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You're running yourself into the ground for a business that's dying anyway." His words stung because they were partly true. But they were also missing the point entirely. This wasn't just about business. It was about knowing I could still do something that mattered. That I could still be excellent at something. That I wasn't obsolete yet, no matter what the account books said. "I'll talk to you later, David," I said, too tired to argue. "I need to get this dress to its bride." I hung up before he could say anything else. And that's when I heard footsteps on the sidewalk outside. Quick, excited footsteps. I looked at my watch. 6:55. Sarah was early. I smiled despite my exhaustion and moved toward the door to unlock it. But when I looked through the window, it wasn't Sarah standing there. It was David. He'd driven back. And he was holding a newspaper, the Sunday edition of the Millbrook Gazette, and his face was completely white. Not concerned. Not worried. White. Like he'd seen a ghost. I opened the door, confused. "David, what are you?" "Did you see today's paper?" He interrupted, his voice strange. Shaky. He thrust it toward me. "Mom, did you see it?" I took it from him, bewildered. The Millbrook Gazette isn't exactly hard-hitting journalism. It's mostly local business news, high school sports scores, obituaries, and the occasional human interest story. I rarely bothered reading it. But David was staring at me with such intensity that I looked down at the front page he'd folded open to the Metro section. And there it was. A photograph. A wedding announcement. And everything I thought I knew about the world fell away like fabric torn from its seams. The headline read, "Local businessman weds in intimate ceremony." Below it was a photo of a couple, smiling, radiant. The groom was wearing a sharp suit. The bride was wearing a vintage lace wedding dress with pearl buttons and tulle skirts. Sarah Calloway. And standing next to her, his arm around her waist, his face lit up with joy I hadn't seen in decades, was my late husband. Thomas Hartley. Except Thomas wasn't late. He wasn't dead. He was very much alive, and according to the article, he was marrying Sarah Calloway this morning at 10 a.m. in a private ceremony at the Millbrook Country Club. The same Thomas who I'd mourned for 7 years. The same Thomas whose funeral I'd organized, whose ashes I'd scattered in the lake where we used to fish. The same Thomas whose life insurance money had kept my failing shop afloat for the past several years. I must have made a sound, because David grabbed my arm, steadied me. "Mom," he was saying, his voice coming from very far away. "Mom, sit down. Just sit down." But I couldn't sit. I couldn't move. I just stood there, holding that newspaper, staring at the impossible photograph. Thomas looked older. Grayer. But it was definitely him. The same slightly crooked smile. The same way he tilted his head when he was happy. The same man I'd loved for 34 years, buried for 7, and apparently lost to someone else entirely. If you've ever had a moment where your reality just breaks, you know there's no preparing for it. One second you're standing on solid ground, and the next you're falling through space with nothing to catch you. That's what this felt like. Freefall. Pure, terrifying freefall. And somewhere in my spinning mind, I heard myself think, I stayed up all night repairing the wedding dress of the woman who's marrying my supposedly dead husband. I fixed it perfectly. I made it beautiful for her. I helped her. "I don't understand," I whispered. David, I don't understand." David pulled me toward one of the chairs by the fitting area and forced me to sit. He was talking, saying something about fraud, about investigations, about calling the police, but I couldn't focus on his words. I kept looking at the photograph. At Thomas. At the dress I'd just spent all night restoring with such care, such dedication. The dress I'd made perfect for the woman who was about to marry my husband who wasn't dead. And then another thought crashed through the fog. Sarah knew. When she came here last night, desperate and crying, begging me to fix her dress, she knew who I was. She had to have known. Because there's no way it was a coincidence that she came to my shop, to Eleanor Hartley's shop, to have her wedding dress repaired the night before she married Thomas Hartley. She knew. She looked me in the eyes, called me by name, and let me stay up all night helping her while she prepared to marry my husband. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. The calculated viciousness. She could have gone to any seamstress in 3 counties. But she came to me. She made me an accomplice in my own betrayal. "We need to call the police," David was saying. "Mom, are you hearing me? We need to report this. Dad's alive. He faked his death. This is fraud. This is—" "No," I said quietly. My voice didn't sound like my own. It sounded hollow. Distant. "No police. Not yet." David stared at me. "What? Mom, we have to." "She's coming here," I interrupted, looking at the clock. 7:15. "Sarah. She's supposed to pick up the dress at 7. She'll be here any minute." And just like that, I knew exactly what I was going to do. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the shock. Or maybe it was 42 years of fixing other people's problems, of making things right, of being the person everyone turned to when they needed saving. But something cold and clear settled into my chest, pushing aside the shock and the hurt and the confusion. Sarah Calloway was coming to collect her dress. The dress I'd spent all night perfecting. The dress she'd wear to marry my husband. And I was going to give it to her. But not before I made sure she understood exactly who she'd betrayed. Not before I made her look me in the eyes and face what she'd done. Check the description box below. You're going to want to hear more stories like this. Stories about what happens when betrayal comes dressed as kindness. Because what I did next, what I was about to do, it changed everything. And I need you to understand why. David was pacing the shop floor like a caged animal, his phone in his hand, threatening to call the police if I didn't. But I made him wait. I made him stop and listen. Because I needed him to understand that this wasn't just about Thomas being alive, or about the fraud, or even about the betrayal. This was about me. About what I'd lost. About what had been stolen from me. Not just a husband, but 7 years of grief. 7 years of mourning. 7 years of loneliness and rebuilding and learning how to be a widow when all along, I wasn't one. "David," I said, my voice steadier now, "let me do this my way. Please. Just let me face her." He looked at me like I was insane. Maybe I was. But he finally nodded, tucked his phone in his pocket, and stood beside me. Waiting. We both heard her at the same time, those same frantic heels clicking on the sidewalk outside. 7:22. She was late. Probably nervous. Probably thinking about her big day, about how beautiful she'd look in that dress I'd saved for her. The bell chimed when she pushed through the door. Sarah Calloway walked in wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweatshirt, her hair pulled back, her face scrubbed clean of yesterday's mascara tears. She looked young, fresh, happy. And when she saw me standing there beside the dress in its protective plastic, her face lit up with such genuine relief and gratitude that I almost lost my nerve. "Oh my God," she breathed. "You did it. You actually did it." She rushed toward the dress, reaching for it, but I stepped between her and the garment. "Sarah," I said quietly, and something in my tone made her freeze. She looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw the exact moment she realized something was wrong. Her smile faltered. Her eyes darted to David, who was standing by the work table with his arms crossed, his expression thunderous. "Is everything okay?" she asked carefully. I picked up the newspaper from where I'd left it on the counter and held it up, letting her see the photograph. The wedding announcement. "Thomas. I saw this morning's paper," I said. "Congratulations on your wedding." The color drained from her face. For a long moment, she just stood there, frozen, staring at the photo like she couldn't quite process what was happening. Then she looked at me, and I saw something flicker in her eyes. Not guilt. Not shame. Calculation. She was deciding how to play this. What story to tell. What lie would work best. "Eleanor," she started, and hearing my name from her mouth made my stomach turn. "I can explain." "Can you?" I interrupted. "Can you explain why you came to my shop last night? Why you, of all people, needed me specifically to repair your wedding dress? Because I'm having trouble understanding that particular coincidence, Sarah." She swallowed hard. Glanced at David. Back at me. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I swear, I didn't know who you were when I came here. I saw your shop and I was desperate and—" "Don't," David said, his voice sharp enough to cut. "Don't insult us with lies. You knew exactly who she was. You knew exactly what you were doing." Sarah's composure cracked then. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but they looked different from yesterday's tears. Less desperate. More defensive. "Okay," she said. "Okay, fine. Yes. I knew. But you have to understand." "I don't have to understand anything," I said, and I was amazed by how calm my voice sounded. How cold. "What I understand is that my husband faked his death 7 years ago. That I mourned him. That I scattered what I thought were his ashes. That I collected life insurance money that I used to keep this shop running because I thought I was alone. And now I discover he's been alive this whole time, and he's marrying you. You. A woman young enough to be his daughter." "It's not like that," Sarah protested. "We fell in love. We couldn't help it. He was trapped in his marriage, trapped in his life, and he needed to be free." Trapped. The word came out like venom. "We were married for 34 years. We raised a son. We built a life. And he was trapped." Sarah's expression shifted then, hardened. "Yes," she said, her voice gaining strength. "He was. He told me everything, Eleanor. About how you suffocated him with your neediness. How you refused to let go of this failing shop even though it was draining him dry. How he felt like he was dying slowly in this miserable little town with a woman who cared more about her sewing machine than she did about him." Each word was a knife, carefully placed. I felt David move beside me, heard him start to speak, but I held up a hand to stop him. Because I needed to hear this. I needed to understand who Thomas had become. What story he'd told himself, told her, to justify what he'd done. "So he faked his death," I said slowly. "He let me believe he was gone. He let our son believe his father was dead. He collected life insurance money through fraud. And then he ran off to start a new life with you. Is that about right?" Sarah lifted her chin. "He did what he had to do to be happy. And I'm not going to apologize for loving him." The audacity of it was staggering. She stood there in my shop, the morning of her wedding to my husband, defending her right to him like I was the intruder. Like I was the obstacle that had to be removed so she could have her fairy tale. "You came here last night," I said, "and you made me fix your dress. You watched me agree to stay up all night for you. You cried and begged and made yourself helpless so I'd feel needed. So I'd do anything to help you. Why?" For the first time, Sarah looked uncomfortable. Ashamed, even. "Tom wanted me to," she admitted quietly. "He said you'd never be able to resist helping someone who needed you. He said you'd stay up all night if you had to, because that's who you are. He said," she stopped, but I needed to hear it. "He said what?" "He said it would be poetic. His old life fixing things for his new one. He thought it was funny." She said it so quietly I almost didn't hear her. But I did. And in that moment, I understood exactly who Thomas had become. Not just a man who'd run away from his responsibilities, but a man who found pleasure in cruelty. Who'd turned his wife into a punchline. Who'd orchestrated this entire humiliation as a private joke. If you've ever discovered that someone you loved, someone you trusted completely, is actually a stranger wearing a familiar face, you know there's a moment where everything just inverts. Where love turns to something else entirely. Something colder. Sharper. I felt that inversion happening inside me as I stood there, looking at Sarah in her yoga pants, about to get married in the dress I'd perfected for her. I walked over to the dress, ran my hand over the plastic covering, felt the layers of tulle and lace beneath. All those hours of work. All that care. I'd made it perfect because that's what I do. I fix things. I make them beautiful. And Thomas had counted on that. He'd bet on my nature, on my inability to turn away someone in need. And he'd won. "The dress is ready," I said, lifting it off the hanger. "You should probably get going if you want to make it to the country club by 10. Sarah stared at me, confused. You're giving it to me?" "Of course," I said. "I finished it. You paid me. Why wouldn't I give it to you?" David made a sound of protest, but I shot him a look that silenced him. Sarah reached for the dress hesitantly, like she thought it might be a trick. But I handed it over gently, carefully, the way I'd hand over any completed work to any client. "It's perfect," I said. "You'll look beautiful. Tell Thomas the first said congratulations." Sarah took the dress, her expression a mixture of relief and confusion and something that might have been guilt. She backed toward the door, clutching the garment like a shield. "Thank you," she whispered. "I know you don't understand, but—" "You're right," I interrupted. "I don't understand. But it doesn't matter anymore. Go get married, Sarah. Be happy. You've earned it." She left. The bell chimed behind her, and then she was gone, and I was alone with my son in the shop that had witnessed my entire life. David was staring at me like I'd lost my mind. "Mom," he said. "What the hell was that? Why did you just let her walk out of here? Why didn't you?" "Because," I said calmly, walking over to my phone, "there are some things you can't fix with confrontation. Some wrongs that need a different kind of correction." I picked up my phone and dialed a number I'd found in the newspaper article. The number for the Millbrook Country Club. When someone answered, I asked to speak to the event coordinator. And when she came on the line, I said very clearly, very calmly, "My name is Eleanor Hartley. I'm calling about the Callaway-Hartley wedding taking place at 10 a.m. this morning. I have some important information about the groom that I think the bride's family should know before the ceremony proceeds." David's eyes went wide. And I smiled for the first time since seeing that photograph. Because Thomas thought he knew me. He thought he could predict my every move, use my kindness as a weapon against me. But he'd forgotten something important. He'd forgotten that kindness and weakness aren't the same thing. And that sometimes, the people who spend their lives fixing things know exactly how to break them too. The Millbrook Country Club is a 15-minute drive from my shop. I know because I'd been there many times over the years. Charity events, anniversary dinners, the occasional wedding reception where I'd delivered a last-minute alteration. It's the kind of place that tries very hard to look elegant, with its manicured lawns and white columns and crystal chandeliers, but there's something hollow about it. Something performative. It had never felt like somewhere Thomas and I belonged. We were working people. Practical people. Or at least, I thought we were. David drove. I sat in the passenger seat, still wearing yesterday's clothes, running on nothing but coffee and adrenaline and a cold, clear fury I didn't entirely recognize. The event coordinator, a woman named Patricia whom I'd met several times before, had been professional on the phone. Concerned, but not dismissive. She'd asked me to come to the club, to speak with her in person before the ceremony. She'd promised discretion. I'd promised truth. Are you sure about this? David asked as we pulled into the parking lot. His hands were tight on the steering wheel. Once you do this, there's no taking it back. Dad will know. Sarah will know. Everyone will know. Good, I said. Let them know. We walked into the country club through the main entrance. The lobby was decorated with white flowers and trailing ivy, everything pristine and elegant for the 10 a.m. ceremony that was, according to my watch, supposed to start in 30 minutes. Patricia met us immediately, ushering us into a private office off the main hall. She was a tall woman in her 50s, impeccably dressed, and the concern on her face looked genuine. Mrs. Hartley, she said carefully. You mentioned on the phone that you had important information about the groom. About Thomas Hartley. Yes, I said. I reached into my purse and pulled out the documents I'd grabbed from my shop before we left. Thomas's death certificate, the life insurance papers, our marriage license, photographs of our life together. I laid them out on her desk like evidence in a trial. Thomas Hartley is my husband. We've been married for 41 years. 7 years ago, he faked his death, collected fraudulent life insurance, and apparently started a new life with Sarah Calloway. She knows he's married. She knows he faked his death. And in about half an hour, she's planning to go through with a wedding ceremony that's not just morally reprehensible but legally invalid. Patricia's face went pale. She picked up the death certificate, examined it, looked at the marriage license. My God, she whispered. Does the bride's family know? I have no idea what Sarah has told them, I said. But I know what she told me last night when she showed up at my shop begging me to repair her wedding dress. She knew exactly who I was. She knew exactly what she was doing. And so did Thomas. They orchestrated this together. Patricia sat down heavily in her chair. For a long moment, she just stared at the documents. Then she looked up at me, and I saw something shift in her expression. The Calloways are a prominent family in this town, she said quietly. Sarah's father is on the country club board. This wedding, there are over 100 guests. The reception is fully catered. If what you're saying is true. It's true, David interjected. We have proof. We have documentation. And we're prepared to involve law enforcement if necessary. Patricia nodded slowly. I need to speak with the Calloways. And I need to speak with the bride. Mrs. Hartley, would you be willing to wait here? To speak with them directly if needed? Yes, I said. That's why I came. She left. David and I sat in that office, surrounded by the muted sounds of a wedding about to happen. Caterers moving through the halls, musicians tuning instruments somewhere nearby, the murmur of early arriving guests. I thought about all the weddings I'd been part of over the years. All the dresses I'd made, all the alterations I'd completed, all the brides I'd helped transform into the women they wanted to be on their special day. I'd always loved weddings. The hope in them. The promise. But sitting there, waiting to destroy one, I felt something cold and righteous and utterly unfamiliar. 20 minutes later, Patricia returned. With her were two people. A man in his 60s wearing an expensive suit and a woman about the same age in a pale blue dress. They looked shell-shocked. The man's face was red with barely contained rage. The woman looked like she might cry. Mrs. Hartley, Patricia said quietly, these are Sarah's parents. Robert and Linda Calloway. I've explained the situation. They'd like to hear it from you directly. I stood, looked at them, and told them everything. About the shop. About Sarah's arrival last night. About the dress. About the newspaper. About the marriage that never ended and the death that never happened. I showed them the documents. I answered their questions. And I watched as their daughter's perfect wedding day crumbled in real time. She said he was a widower, Linda Calloway whispered, her voice breaking. She said his wife had died and he'd been alone for years. She said, she couldn't finish. She pressed a hand to her mouth and turned away. Robert Calloway's hands were shaking. "Where is she?" he asked Patricia. "Where's Sarah?" "In the bridal suite," Patricia said. "Getting ready." "Sir, what do you want me to do?" "Cancel it," he said. His voice was granite. "Cancel everything. The ceremony, the reception, all of it. Clear the venue. Tell the guests there's been an emergency. I don't care what you tell them. Just end this." Patricia nodded and hurried out. Linda Calloway looked at me, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry," she said. "We didn't know. I swear to you we didn't know." "I believe you," I said. And I did. Because I recognized the look in her eyes. The same look I'd seen in my own mirror 100 times over the past 7 years. The look of someone who'd been lied to by someone they loved. Someone who'd built their world on trust that turned out to be sand. Robert Calloway was already moving toward the door, his jaw set, his entire body radiating fury. "I need to speak with my daughter," he said. "And I need to speak with that son of a bitch she was about to marry." "Mr. Calloway," I said, and my voice stopped him. He turned back to look at me. "Before you go up there, there's something you should know. Thomas is very good at this. At lying. At making himself the victim. At making everyone else feel like they're the problem. He'll have a story ready. He'll make Sarah believe she's the one being persecuted. He'll twist this into something where he's the wounded party." Robert's expression hardened even further. "Then I'll make sure he understands exactly how wrong he is." They left. David and I stood alone in that office again, and I felt something inside me start to shake. Not regret. Not second thoughts. Just the sheer enormity of what was happening. What I'd set in motion. Somewhere above us, in the bridal suite, Sarah was probably still in that dress I'd spent all night fixing. Still thinking she was about to walk down the aisle. Still believing in whatever fantasy Thomas had sold her. "Mom," David said softly. "Are you okay?" I thought about that question. About what okay even meant anymore. My husband was alive. My grief had been a lie. My entire identity as a widow had been fiction. The insurance money I'd used to keep my shop running was fraud. Everything I'd believed about my life for 7 years was wrong. Was I okay? No. Would I ever be okay again? I didn't know. "I'm something," I finally said. "I don't know what. But I'm something." We heard it then, shouting from upstairs. Muffled but unmistakable. A woman's voice, high and panicked. A man's voice, deep and angry. And then another man's voice, defensive, trying to explain. "Thomas." I'd know that voice anywhere. Even after 7 years of believing I'd never hear it again, I knew it instantly. David moved toward the door like he was going to go up there, but I grabbed his arm. "No," I said. "Let them handle it. This is their daughter. Their family. We've done our part." But even as I said it, I felt the pull. The terrible, magnetic need to see him. To confront him. To look Thomas in the eyes and ask him why. Why he'd done this. Why he'd destroyed me. Why I hadn't been enough. The questions I'd never get to ask a dead man were suddenly available again, and the temptation to go find him was overwhelming. Before I could decide, Patricia returned, her face flushed. "The ceremony is cancelled," she said. "The groom has left the premises. Mr. Calloway escorted him out personally and made it very clear he's not welcome back. The bride is," she paused, choosing her words carefully. "The bride is being attended to by her mother and family. The guests have been informed of a medical emergency. The venue is being cleared." "Where did Thomas go?" I asked. Patricia shook her head. "I don't know. Mr. Calloway said something about calling the police. About pressing charges for fraud. I think you should speak with them about that directly. But Mrs. Hartley," she looked at me with something like awe. "What you did today coming here, telling the truth, it took courage. I want you to know that." Courage. It didn't feel like courage. It felt like survival. Like the only possible response to discovering your entire life had been a lie. But I nodded, accepted her words, and let David guide me back out to the car. We sat in the parking lot for a long time, watching well-dressed guests file out of the country club, looking confused and concerned, their Sunday morning ruined by drama they'd never understand. I wondered what they'd been told. I wondered what rumors would spread. I wondered if anyone would ever know the whole truth, or if it would just become another piece of Millbrook gossip, distorted and retold until it bore no resemblance to reality. "What now?" David asked finally. "Now," I said, "we go to the police. We report the fraud. We start untangling this mess." And then, I stopped, because I didn't know what came after. How do you rebuild a life when the foundation was never real? How do you grieve for someone who isn't dead but might as well be? How do you forgive yourself for not seeing what was right in front of you? We filed the police report that afternoon. Fraud. Identity theft. Insurance fraud. The detective who took our statement was sympathetic but realistic. "This kind of case is complicated," he said. "It'll take time to investigate. And there's a statute of limitations on some of these charges. I can't promise you what the outcome will be." I didn't care about outcomes. I cared about the truth being documented. About there being an official record that said, Eleanor Hartley was wronged. Her husband faked his death. She was a victim, not a fool. Over the next few days, the story spread through Millbrook like wildfire. I became the talk of the town, the tragic dressmaker whose husband had faked his death and tried to remarry. People I barely knew stopped me on the street to offer sympathy. Former clients called to check on me. The local news even tried to interview me, but I refused. This wasn't entertainment. This was my life, broken open for everyone to see. Sarah Calloway left town. I heard through the grapevine that her parents had sent her to stay with relatives out of state, away from the scandal and the whispers. I didn't feel sorry for her. Maybe I should have. Maybe she was a victim too, in some way, manipulated by Thomas's lies. But every time I started to feel sympathy, I remembered her standing in my shop, telling me Thomas had been trapped in his marriage to me. Telling me he deserved to be happy. Using words like weapons. Thomas himself vanished. The police had questions for him, the insurance company had questions for him, I had questions for him, but he was gone. No forwarding address. No contact information. Just gone again, the way he'd been gone for 7 years. Except this time, I knew he was out there somewhere, alive, probably spinning a new story for a new audience. And me? I kept the shop open. David stopped asking me to close it. I think he understood finally that it wasn't about the money or the practicality. It was about having something that was mine. Something Thomas hadn't touched or tainted or ruined. Every dress I altered, every hem I fixed, every button I replaced was proof that I still existed. That I was still Eleanor Hartley, skilled dressmaker, even if I didn't know who else I was anymore. About 3 weeks after the cancelled wedding, I received a letter. No return address. Postmarked from somewhere in Ohio. I knew who it was from before I opened it. My hands shook as I unfolded the single sheet of paper inside. Eleanor. Asterisk, I know you won't understand this, and I'm not asking you to forgive me. But I need you to know that I didn't do this to hurt you. I did it because I was drowning. Our marriage, that town, that life, it was killing me slowly. I felt invisible. I felt like I was disappearing. And then I met Sarah, and she saw me. Really saw me. She made me feel alive again. Asterisk. Asterisk, faking my death was the only way out I could see. I couldn't divorce you, you would have fought for the shop, for everything, and I just needed to be free. So I found a way. I know it was wrong. I know it hurt you. But I don't regret it. For the first time in decades, I was happy. Asterisk. Asterisk, the wedding was Sarah's idea, actually. The dress, I mean. Having you fix it. She thought it would be too risky, that you'd figure it out. But I told her you wouldn't. I told her you'd just see someone who needed help, and you'd do anything to help them because that's who you are. You can't help yourself. You have to fix things, even when they can't be fixed. Asterisk. Asterisk, I'm sorry it ended this way. I'm sorry you found out. But I'm not sorry I left. And I hope someday you can understand that. Asterisk. T. I read that letter 3 times. And then I did something I hadn't done since the morning I saw his photograph in the newspaper. I cried. Not sad tears. Not grief tears. Angry tears. Furious, cleansing, liberating tears. Because that letter told me everything I needed to know. Thomas hadn't left because I was suffocating him or because our marriage was broken. He'd left because he was selfish. Because he wanted to feel special. Because he'd found someone who saw him the way he wanted to be seen, and he was willing to destroy everything. Me, our son, our life, to chase that feeling. He thought he knew me. He thought my kindness was weakness. My generosity was naivety. My willingness to help was something he could exploit. And maybe he was right, to a point. Maybe I had spent too much of my life fixing things for other people. Maybe I had lost myself in the process of taking care of everyone else. But here's what Thomas didn't understand, what he never understood. Fixing things isn't weakness. It's power. It's choosing to make the world better, even when you have every reason not to. It's looking at something broken and believing it can be whole again. And yes, sometimes that makes you vulnerable. Sometimes people take advantage of it. But it's still worth doing. Because the alternative, being the person who breaks things, who lies, who runs away, that's not strength. That's cowardice. I burned the letter. Took it out to the small patio behind my shop and set it on fire, watched the paper curl and blacken and disappear. And with it, I burned the last of my grief for Thomas Hartley. He wasn't worth grieving. He never had been. 6 months later, I'm still here. Still running my shop. Still making dresses and fixing hems and sewing on buttons. The business is actually doing better now than it has in years. I think people appreciate the story, the resilience. They want to support the woman who survived her husband's betrayal and kept going. It's a little ironic, honestly. Thomas wanted to leave me with nothing, and instead, his betrayal gave me a kind of local fame. A reputation for strength. David visits every weekend now. He's stopped asking me to retire. Instead, he brings his kids, my grandchildren, and they play in the shop while I work. They love the bolts of fabric and the buttons in jars and the old sewing machine that belonged to their great-grandmother. I'm teaching my oldest granddaughter, Emma, how to sew. She's 8, and she's already better at straight seams than I was at her age. She has the patience for it. The eye. The love. Sometimes, late at night when the shop is quiet and I'm alone with my thoughts, I wonder where Thomas is. If he's happy. If he ever thinks about me. If he regrets what he did. But those thoughts don't hurt the way they used to. They're just curiosity now. Distant and detached. He's someone I used to know. Someone I used to love. But he's not real anymore. The Thomas the first married died 7 years ago. This other man, this stranger with his face and his name, he's not my problem anymore. And Sarah? I heard she got engaged again, to someone her own age this time. Someone without a secret past. I hope she's learned something from all this. I hope she understands now that you can't build a real life on lies, no matter how beautiful the dress is. As for me, I've learned something too. I've learned that you can survive anything. That betrayal doesn't have to destroy you. That sometimes the thing you think is your weakness, your kindness, your willingness to help, your inability to turn away someone in need, is actually your greatest strength. Because I'm still here. I'm still standing. I'm still Eleanor Hartley, dressmaker, mother, grandmother. Still fixing things. Still making broken things beautiful. Thomas thought he could use my nature against me. He thought he could make me complicit in my own humiliation. But what he didn't realize is that by asking me to fix that dress, he gave me a gift. He showed me exactly who he'd become. He gave me proof of his betrayal that I could hold in my hands. And he gave me the opportunity to stop him from hurting someone else's family the way he'd hurt ours. So yes, I fixed that dress. I made it perfect. And then I used it to fix something much more important, my own life. My own story. My own sense of who I am and what I'm worth. And if that's not revenge, I don't know what is. If you've stayed with me through this whole story, if you've listened to every word, then you understand now why I had to tell it. Why I needed you to hear it. Because somewhere out there, someone else is being lied to. Someone else is being betrayed. Someone else is wondering if they're crazy, if they're imagining things, if they're the problem. And I need them to know, you're not. You're not crazy. You're not the problem. And you can survive this. You can survive anything. Check the description box below for more stories like this one. Stories about survival and strength and what happens when we refuse to let betrayal define us. And if this story meant something to you, if it helped you in some way, leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me your story if you want to. Because we're not alone in this. None of us are. And sometimes, just knowing that someone else understands, that someone else has lived through their own version of this nightmare and come out the other side, sometimes that's enough. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. Thank you for letting me tell you about the day a woman asked me to fix her dress, and I ended up fixing my life instead.